This is Ron Kessler for Newsmax TV, and we're here with Edwin Meese. He was Chief of Staff to Ronald Reagan when Reagan was Governor of California. He was U.S. Attorney General when Reagan was in the White House. He was his Chief Policy Advisor as well in the White House, and he was his friend. Very nice to be with you. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of the Obama administration's approach to the war on terror?
Well, I think the Obama administration has kind of had an ambivalent approach to the war on terror in terms of some of the things that they've done, and without having a consistent, comprehensive, and coordinated strategy, which clearly indicates how they're going to deal with the problem of terrorism, which is certainly a continuing problem for the country, just as it was during the period that George W. Bush was president. In some things, they have carried on the same policies of George W. Bush because of necessity. They had to. But at the same time, they said they didn't want to carry on those policies. For example, they want to close Guantanamo. Now, in that case, they also agreed with George W. Bush, who wanted to also, although I think that for both presidents, that was the wrong policy. Guantanamo was established for a very important purpose. It was designed to house incarcerated prisoners, terrorists, who either fit either one of several categories. Either they were very dangerous, they were culpable of serious crimes against the laws of war, or they might, in some cases, they might be people who were highly involved in the terrorist plots and had information that would be useful to prevent further terrorist activities. It was an ideal spot. We put a lot of money into building facilities there that were both humane, but also would keep them safely incarcerated. And there's absolutely no reason at all why that facility should not be continued as the principal place to hold that type of terrorist prisoner. Another example, of course, would be the terminology. Instead of calling it a war or military activity, they call it overseas contingency operations. In terms of talking about terrorism acts, they talk about man-made disasters. In other words, why have these euphemisms instead of talking about the situation as it really is? And that is a serious threat to the peace and freedom of the peoples around the world, including the United States. There are other examples that I could give, such as having this dilemma about where to hold trials. There should be a simple solution. I've talked about this in various fora, about the idea if there are American citizens committing terrorist acts in the United States or abroad, not in the field of combat, such as Afghanistan or Iraq, but committing terrorist acts, say, in other cities, they ought to be handled in criminal courts because they're United States citizens. If there are people from another country who come into the United States to commit terrorist acts, they are nothing less or more than foreign enemies, and they should be tried in military commissions as we did during World War II. If there are people who are caught on the field of battle, whether they be citizens of the United States or foreign terrorists who are on the field of battle combating United States troops in direct combat, they all ought to be handled by military commissions. Simple guidelines like that would take all the questioning and the uncertainty out of how you deal with these situations. This is the whole problem, is having a consistent and continuous strategy so that people on both sides, those people who might be involved in terrorism as well as our own citizens who want to be protected, would understand what our policy and what our strategy is.
How would you compare Ronald Reagan's leadership style with President Obama's leadership style?
The leadership style of Ronald Reagan as compared with current President Obama were quite different. In some ways, I guess you could say there's a similarity in the fact that they were both very accomplished communicators. But I think in terms of the policies and their approach to problems, the situation is quite different. Ronald Reagan was very direct. He made clear what his strategies, what his policies were. He talked with the people directly and explained them in detail, and then he consistently held to his policies. That was why he was so effective with the Soviet Union, and of course in that case was able to bring the Cold War to an end with the forces of freedom and the West winning. By contrast, I think we see that President Obama has been somewhat ambivalent, has changed policies, has set policies and not followed through on them, or has otherwise been uncertain about exactly what the strategies and policies are. Ronald Reagan was very clear when he said that the Soviet Union was an evil empire. He wanted to make it clear that we were engaging them on a moral plane as well as on a diplomatic and a military plane. I think it's that lack of firmness and lack of specificity in terms of our objectives and our approach that most marks the difference between the two men.
John Martin, who was in charge of prosecuting spies, prosecuted 75 spies, only one acquittal under you in part, told me that through all that period of the year of the spy, when you had Pollard, Walker, a lot of controversial cases, there was never any hint of political influence from you. You always just wanted it straight. And it seems that with Eric Holder, there are political decisions. You know, it's hard to figure out just what's behind some of these decisions, but clearly he's emulating the policies of Obama. Is that your take on things?
Well, I think there's a great deal of difference. The way in which cases were handled, including terrorism and national security cases, the way they were handled under the Reagan administration and how they're being handled today. Under Ronald Reagan, it was his absolute directive that politics should never enter into any kind of decision, whether it was a civil case, a criminal case, a terrorism case, a national security case, whatever it might be. And of course, that was my own view as well as Attorney General, so that was absolutely the rule. We did not have any contact between the White House and the Department of Justice, particularly those who were handling specific cases, on any matter, any investigation or any case, because Ronald Reagan wanted to be sure that the department would, and as did I, that the department would act independently on the basis of the facts and what the law said, without any possibility of accusation of politics coming into it at all. Today, we have seen the White House apparently having a great influence over the actions of the Justice Department, and we've seen a great deal of situations in which politics seem to have entered into the decisions, such as where to try terrorists who have been captured for very serious offenses against the United States and our citizens, things such as different policies that have been made in regard to criminal cases within the United States and civil cases such as the Black Panther Party intimidation of voters and things such as that. And I think the fact that the White House is involved, apparently, in decisions on where to try cases, criminal cases, on the whole issue of Guantanamo and those kinds of things, would indicate that political considerations appear to be more prevalent in this administration than I've seen them in any other.
And what does that mean? Is that a corruption of the process and respect for the law?
Well, when you have politics involved in decisions that should be made on the basis of facts and law, it really is, in my opinion, an offense against the rule of law, which should be totally impartial and should not depend on any political qualifications or political influence or anything other than the facts of the case itself and the applicable law.
President Obama wanting to expand the government, wanting to spend more. What is behind that, do you think?
I believe that President Obama and the people who advise him and many of the people who are his financial supporters all believe that government should do more and more and should have more and more power. It's exactly the opposite of what the founders of our country had in mind. And that is why they have grown government more in 2 years than we've seen in any other period of time, other than perhaps in the period of the Great Depression of the 1930s and World War II. But what has happened here has gone even beyond that in certain ways. For example, the government actually taking over ownership of major industries. The fact of having a so-called stimulus bill, which was nothing more than pork barrel spending for favored organizations with a very little amount of money going to actual infrastructure improvement and that sort of thing. To have the creation of czars, as they've been called by the press, who are people that are not accountable to the American people through confirmation process in the Senate, but instead have been appointed under the President's White House appointing authority, so that they've been able to dodge the usual process of questioning by Congress and the Senate and the usual confirmation processes. The fact that we have built up now a tremendous continuing national deficit in the budgets, which have led to the greatest increase in the national debt that we've ever seen under one president, and that's only less than 2 years into his presidency. So I think what we have is a very different approach to the presidency than almost anyone we've seen in quite some years.
And why is that? Why did the American people, elect Obama?
When Obama ran for office, he didn't really give a hint of the amount of spending that he would be involved in. In fact, he tried to represent himself as a very middle-of-the-road person, not a scary person at all in terms of his lust for power. He sublimated all of the things that have come to pass since his election. And so there was no idea that he would be trying to evade the Constitution, the confirmation process, these sorts of things. So his activities, his actions while in office are at great variance from the way in which he campaigned in 2008. And so that's one of the reasons why the American people today are so angry, why his approval ratings have gone down so far, why people are so angry at government, and that is they feel they've been duped. And that's why so many people, quite frankly, are reading the Constitution for the first time. Why you have these demonstrations, people coming to town hall, the town hall meetings of members of Congress, why you have people attending these Tea Party events, so-called, all because people feel that the democratic republic that the founders gave us is now in danger.
This is Ron Kessler for Newsmax TV, and thank you very much for a fascinating interview.